going on, YouTube universe? Welcome to the Hip and Shoulder, where we discuss everything Australian rules football, and today we are turning attention to round 16 of the 2026 home and away season. Two things to note here. The first is we're finally through the mid-season buys, which is absolutely fucking fantastic, because as somebody who loves football as much as I do, it is kind of a feeling of being few and far between when it comes to only being able to watch, 7 games of football opposed to 9. And I know that's only a 2-game difference, but that's still 2 games of football we're missing out on. And in some retrospects with certain rounds, we get less games, we get more games. I'm just still in the strong belief that we can handle buy structures better, in the way of, instead of having like 4 to 5 weeks, we can do 1 or 2 weeks. And we can do something, for example, say, come the exact middle point of the year, let's take a week or 2 off. Let's just have maybe round 12 play out, then we have a week or 2, and then we come back for round 13. And in those 2 weeks off, we can maybe highlight the under-18 championships. We can have, these younger teams, the younger talent that is looking to get drafted in the upcoming draft, pool showcase. And everybody gets eyes on it, and AFL can then push that fact, so then we hype up more this young talent coming through, and we give exposure on television to these young kids. I reckon it is the perfect opportunity to do so. Let me know in the comments down below if you agree. But the second thing is, we are less than 10 games out from the season being wrapped up. I think it's a 24-game season, right? I could be completely mistaken. If that's the case, we have 8 rounds of football to go. It's so fucking wild, because during the off season, even though we can follow the trade period, the draft period, all the pre-season news, that distance between the grand final to round 0, effectively the first game, feels like it stretches out for so long. And it is such a boring period for myself, because I don't have football to watch on the screen, just like you guys at home. But then the season rolls around and all the hype quickly disappears, because the season comes and goes so incredibly quickly. Alas, round 16, we had some absolute belter matchups heading into the round, and I feel over the last couple of weeks, we've been able to truly decipher who the real contenders are, and maybe some teams that are shaping up to be pretenders after a hot start to the year. And it all started at the Gabba, Thursday night, Brisbane taking on Sydney, the reigning premiers, who haven't had the ideal start to their year, but they've started to claw their way back. And Sydney, who sit outright second, but have started to falter a little bit. There's some cracks starting to open up in their game, and some teams have been able to get the better of them. They've probably counted themselves lucky that over the last couple of weeks, they've taken very close scalps over St Kilda and Port Adelaide, 2 games that they should have really lost, and that might have even had them outside of that top 4 configuration, which is absolutely wild, because when you think about it, Sydney have been playing one of the best brands consistently all year, but their undoing came at the brand that they have been playing, which we will get to momentarily after I break down the match timeline to show you the dominance that Brisbane ran with after quarter time. The quarter time gap was 10 points the way of Brisbane, 4 goals 125 to 2-3 15. Halftime, Brisbane led 8-7 55 to 4-4 28. 3-quarter time, 14-9 93 led 7-9 51, and the final score saw 19-12 126 defeat 12-11 83. You would be mistaken to think that with the statistical breakdown of this game that it was just purely the stoppage work from Brisbane that dismantled Sydney, but the defensive rebounding from Brisbane was very Sydney-like. It is a game that Brisbane truly launched from their back 50 and set everything up forward of the ball, and even the commentary team for this game were like lauding the back 6 of Brisbane. And to no surprise, Ryan Lester comes back into this defensive half and really just adds another dynamic. I said that in the tipping video heading into this round, and the proof is in the pudding. He's not like this elite, S-tier player that's running around and everybody has to have on their team. that he is a role player who gets his job done each and every week, and he just has this dynamic about him that shifts the mentality of that back half of Brisbane. I had a feeling, even though I tipped Sydney, that there was room for Brisbane to win this game, even though the Gabba hasn't been that fortress for them, in recent years. They've gone from being almost untouchable at this ground to being open up by teams. And Sydney's game plan, I honestly thought the run and carry game of Sydney could dismantle Brisbane, but it was that run and carry game that dismantled themselves. Too often you would see Sydney get a fast break, and instead of opting for a kick, and you could clearly see around the ground, there were many different opportunities to get a kick forward and to take a mark and to maybe even just stem the flow a little bit. But then you'd have an errant handball either go way too far ahead, they would turn the ball over by hand, and it was something that I touted for Fremantle in round 15 against Geelong, where Fremantle had a couple of fumbles and situations where they started to over handball a little bit too much, and it started to be their undoing, but they reined it in. Where Sydney went wrong is they still tried to push the fact, and all those turnovers in that back six for Brisbane were able to launch the attack that absolutely tore Sydney to shreds. That being said, it was also, as I mentioned, paired with the stoppage work. Around the contest, it was, a dominant performance from this midfield core, and Will Ashcroft leading the charge once more, just really coming into his own as a player. I said coming into this season that if we can get a home and away season put together where he emulates what he did last year in the final series, he could be a true game winner, Brownlow contender, things of that nature, and he gets plenty of the ball. He's damaging with it. The only thing I don't like, and I've noticed this with a few Brisbane players, you can throw Zach Bailey under that banner, you can throw Levi Ashcroft, Will Ashcroft. More often than not, you see them rolling the shoulder, trying to draw that head-high free kick, and I just hate that. Regardless of who you play for, what player you are, it just takes a little bit of integrity, I feel, out of the game when you're so dominant with ball in hand and you're so clean, but you still opt to roll the shoulder to draw something so innocuous. I don't like it. But the stoppage game, as I said, they led clearances by 13, and from that 13 gap, they managed to score 7 goals for. So they scored 46 points from stoppage. Sydney only managed 18 points, 2 goals 6. It is the lowest kind of, in retrospect to the dominance and the lack of pressure from Sydney around the contest, this was their third lowest pressure game for the season against Brisbane, in a game that they should have been ripe for the picking. They get Errol Goulden back in, Brodie Grundy gets some support in the ruck, they bring back Tom McCartan to full back. I honestly thought this Sydney lineup was stacked and ready to go, but they were absolutely dismantled, and just Brisbane managing an extra 40 uncontested marks around the ground, and from defensive 50, as I said, they scored 31 points. It was an absolute masterclass from Chris Fagan, and you could just see that they had obviously trained to lock this kind of game style down. They were always forward half of the ball, so whenever Sydney tried to get that handball press, Brisbane players had already choked up a little bit further back to get that intercept game to put that pressure on. It was incredible, which tells me, if we're to pull anything out of this game, what did we learn from Sydney? Obviously, you live by the sword that you wield, and obviously the run and carry game can win you games, but it did not here. They fell on their own sword. But what did we learn about Brisbane? They have counter-attack that can challenge the best and beat the best, and if they can do it to Sydney, I have no doubt that they can do it against Fremantle as well, especially with the rip Fremantle's on right now. I mean, this coming weekend, beating the Gold Coast, they put themselves in a 14-game win streak from the 15 they've played. They only lost to Geelong by 10 odd points in that first game. They could seriously be sitting undefeated after this many games into the season, which it's just mind-blowing how some of these teams have been performing this year. But Brisbane really starting to mount a charge at the right time. I said games like this need to be games that Brisbane win, not only for their own confidence and their self-belief, but they need to start showing the rest of the competition that they're still a contender. Because for the first half of the year, we've seen them up and about, and we've seen ups and downs, like even against Richmond. They put Richmond away by 30 plus points in the end, but they struggled against Richmond in that first half, and that's not a Brisbane that we're used to seeing. You would expect, absolute onslaught dominance from Brisbane, but alas, they managed to get the points here against a very good competition and opposition, and they're really starting to roar into some form at the right time. Having a look at the team stats around the ground, disposals was only marginally the way of Sydney, 366 leading 351. The handball game, as I said, is where the dominance came. 181 to Sydney against 100 for Brisbane. Sydney are averaging 183 handballs a game this year. Absolutely wild, and that's what they're hedging their bets on, and unfortunately does not look like they have a plan B to go to, because when it came to the kicks, Brisbane led that 251 to 185. Inside 50s, surprisingly, Sydney had 56 to 62 and just could not capitalize. Going inside 50, they ran at only 42%. That is 10% less than their seasonal average. For Brisbane, they've been running at a seasonal average of 55%. They run at 61% for this particular game. It was just so incredibly clean by them. Just the setup from that defensive half, the stoppage game, everything in between. Brisbane just had answers all around the ground. While Brisbane lost the hit-out count, which we've seen more often than not this year. A team loses the hit-out count but manages to stem that gap in the actual clearance, the stoppages. 45 to 40 hit-outs, but they won the clearance game 46 to 33, with the stoppage clearances led 27 to 18. Just around the ground, they could not be stopped. Brisbane, as I said, they turned the ball over more, surprisingly, but it was just the lack of any spatial awareness, I feel, with Sydney when they were trying to get that haphazard handball game going. Absolutely destroyed them. Around the ground, 109 marks to 69. They both managed to take 13 marks inside 50, which is actually quite surprising that they took the same amount of marks inside. Tackle game, 62 to 60, so the pressure was there. But and you'd probably, especially when you have a look at this, like tackles inside 50, Sydney have 21 of their 60 inside, but their pressure rating was only about 156, which, as I said, is their third lowest for the year. So there were many situations in this game where Brisbane just got the absolute better of them and ran roughshod and could not be stopped. Breaking down individual input here and voting for who I thought was best on ground, I'm going to do something I don't often do here, and I don't often give 3 votes to a player in a losing team, especially in a game where the team that they play against wins by over 40 points. But it was hard to not justify that the performance from the person I gave 3 votes to was not best on, and I'd be surprised if he didn't get 2, if not 3 Brownlow votes on the night as well. But I gave the 1 vote to Josh Dunkley. I still feel around the competition, around the AFL in general, Josh Dunkley is still one of the most slept on midfielders and one of the most underappreciated midfielders, just especially with the role he plays. I love midfielders who have a very strong defensive stance and sense. They love to tackle, they love to put those pressure acts on, and Josh Dunkley does it better than everybody else. He had 26 disposals, 5 of those were contested, 8 marks, 9 tackles, 2 clearances, 451 metres gained, 1 goal assist, and 4 score involvements. I gave the 2 vote to Will Ashcroft, which many would argue was best on. But I digress, we'll get to that momentarily. He had 30 disposals, 11 of which were contested, 7 marks, 7 tackles, 8 clearances, 548 metres gained, and 8 score involvements. And best on I gave to Chad Warner. I think when you put his game up against Will Ashcroft's game, statistically, even though Brisbane won, Chad Warner had a bigger input, I suppose, on Sydney's overall performance and keeping them in the game, and from an individual standpoint, I thought was clearly best on. 28 disposals, 14 of which were contested, only took the 1 mark but laid 7 tackles, had 8 clearances, 608 metres gained, kicked 4 goals and had 9 score involvements. Now, you could probably take that into isolation and then say, well, he had 9 score involvements, but 4 of those were his own goal, whereas Will Ashcroft had 8 score involvements and didn't score a goal himself. Beggars can't be choosers. It's a bit of a push and pull. I feel you can throw the 2 and the 3 around here, but that's where I landed for this game. And Brisbane walking away with a win that sees them start shaping up for that top 4 finish, and Sydney probably counting themselves lucky, as I said, having defeated St Kilda by that close game, having defeated Port Adelaide. When we look at the ladder later on in today's video, you'll see that those 8 premiership points that they managed to put away for those games are going to go a long way to keeping them up there, but they need to start turning things around. They need to start developing a plan B, and things are only going to get worse because Joel Amadi is looking at potentially being out for 8 to 10 weeks, which means they've just lost one of the strings to their forward 50 bow, and this is not the type of situation they want to start finding themselves in coming into the back end of the season. Friday night shifted over to the MCG with Hawthorn hosting GWS, 2 teams that play a very similar brand of football, and a game I was very much looking forward to. When it comes to run and carry transition, that back half kind of wave of running, Hawthorn and GWS have been setting that standard for recent years, and it's only this year that we have seen other teams like Fremantle and Sydney starting to adopt that kind of gameplay as well. But this was absolutely primed to be an absolute banger, and I feel part of that is only because the outs for Hawthorn maybe equalised the game a little bit, because if they had some of the players that are injured or out with, suspension, this could have been a very much larger differentiation when it comes to final score. It was Hawthorn the way of 14 points in the end, but when you add Jack Gunston back into that forward line, when you have Jarman Impey come back to that half-back line, when you have Josh Weddle's run and carry in there as well, do things exponentially change? And does this go from a 14-point win to a 25 or 30-point win? And in a season where percentage is going to be so critical to the end game, I think that's definitely something that's going to separate, teams. And Hawthorn just managing to get things done despite a rather late charge. I feel GWS started really, putting the foot down. Hawthorn in the third term ran away to a lead that I thought was going to open up an absolute belting, but GWS just kept finding a way to keep bringing the game back, and even late in the game did the exact same thing. But alas, it was not to be had. And after a game that up until half time, well, not even halfway through the second term, when Hawthorn put the foot down, it was a game that I felt Hawthorn had, even when GWS put that that stopper in and started bringing the score back. You get those games where momentum really doesn't shift out of the hands of the opposition all too well, and that's what I feel happened here. At quarter time, Hawthorn led 3 goals 5-23 to 2-4-16. At half time, Hawthorn led 9-6-60 to 4-6-30. That 30-point gap, a very comfortable gap, but we've seen GWS come back from deficits like this before. Hawthorn put the foot down in that third term and started to really push away, but led at 3-quarter time 13-9-87 to 10-6-66. 21 points, still very manageable, and in the end just managing to bring that gap back ever so slightly. Hawthorn win 14-12-96 to 12-10-82, and it was another game where Hawthorn's midfield, even though you comparatively look around the competition and we talk about midfield groups, and Hawthorn's real deficit, I feel, is their midfield. They've got Jai Newcomb, who's gone to strength this year, a Brownlow Smoky in my personal opinion, but outside of that, Will Day coming back in off of injury, he's been missing all year. You've had all these young kids kind of going through in isolated spaces, but when you put them up against other midfields in the competition, this isn't a top 4, top 5, maybe could even argue that there are 8 teams better that have a better midfield built than Hawthorn. We can just rattle off names. We can look at Fremantle's midfield, Gold Coast midfield, at least on paper, not going off of performance this year, but on paper. Fremantle, Gold Coast, Sydney, Port Adelaide, even with Butters, with Horn Francis, with Rosie going through there when he is fit and firing. Adelaide with Rankin, with Rochelle, with Dawson, and with the players rotating through there. Collingwood with Dacos and, you know, Pendlebury, Sidebottom in isolation, and players like that. West Coast even, when you look statistically at teams that have been great in stoppage, West Coast have been absolutely firing this year, which is great to see as a developing team. And you could probably throw a blanket over a couple of others. The Bulldogs obviously bat very deep in that midfield. You could argue St Kilda's midfield is better than Hawthorn's midfield, at least on paper. So there's 9 teams I've just listed. And this was yet another game where they were outmatched in stoppage. GWS, Hawthorn just dominated the stoppage game. And GWS themselves have a midfield that you could argue is better than Hawthorn's midfield. So the fact that Hawthorn are rising to the occasion and digging deep in this centre clearance, this stoppage game, and are getting on top of teams is something to be commended, because when you look at 2 teams going head to head and you think, oh, this game's going to be won by the midfield battle and it's not going to be Hawthorn because they don't have, you know, the S tier, the A tier players running through there, don't be mistaken. They've been pulling the weight. I mean, in this game alone, despite dominating at the turnover game, GWS had 26 fewer clearances than the Hawks. 26. And when you break down some individual performances in this game, there were some Hawthorn midfielders that absolutely ran all over the top of this midfield single-handedly. This was huge. From clearance, Hawthorn kicked 10 goals, 6. So from the 96 points that they scored, 66 of that came from stoppage, which is absolutely huge. And on the flip side, Giants only kicked 1 goal, 4. They managed 10 points from stoppage. That gap of 56 points is the second biggest differential this year of any team in the competition. This is the type of football Hawthorn are now playing. And if this is how they're really going to start setting up their season, especially with players out that are yet to come back and make this team infinitely better, Hawthorn could become one of those teams to watch in that final series. And as much as I hate to say that, because I know every team has spectators and fans that get a little bit ahead of themselves, build a bit of an ego. When Hawthorn supporters are up and about, they are very hard to keep quiet. So let's just hope that, you know, something happens here. Maybe a little bit of a you know, reality check every now and again would do them a little bit of good. But they just are in this game, and especially when you look around the ground, statistically, they were behind. I mean, GWS had 10 more disposals. They had 30 more handballs. Inside 50s, they had 24 more, Hawthorn, than GWS. They were getting plenty of looks inside 50. They were limiting the Giants' looks inside 50. And when we transition into the stoppage game, you will just see the gap. I mean, the ruck gap, the hitouts, 65 to 27, the way of Hawthorn. And Lloyd Meek and Ned Reeves aren't like A-grade ruckmen. These are ruckmen that are just playing a role. They're getting it done. The clearance game, 54 to 30. From that, centre clearance, they won 15 to 9. Stoppage clearance, they won 39 to 21. It was as clinical an inside performance that you will see. And Hawthorn even had 10 more turnovers for the game, so they were less clean with ball in hand. They did turn it over a fair bit, but GWS still just couldn't find a way to answer the counter-attack that Hawthorn started to really launch in the second part, or the back half of that second term. When we talk about the clearances for this game, there is a player that I'm voting for that, and you can just see here off of these numbers, you can clearly see who I'm giving best on ground to, but Jai Newcomb has 15 clearances himself in this game. Will Day manages 8 clearances, 7 clearances for Cam McKenzie, 4 clearances for Josh Ward. Ned Reeves and Lloyd Meek themselves both had 8 between them, 4 apiece. This is, you know, and especially when you look at Cam McKenzie, Josh Ward, Cam McKenzie was one of those players that was floated as a potential offload to bring Zach Merritt in. And a lot of people were arguing, especially Essendon supporters, who's Cam McKenzie? What's Cam McKenzie going to add? Cam McKenzie in this game was one of the better performers, so much so that I actually, if I bring up my little run sheet here when it comes to the votes, I actually did vote for him in this game. It's unreal to see these young kids for Hawthorn really step up. I mean, when you have a look at the fact that Finn Callaghan only managed 4 for GWS, Clayton Oliver only managed 3 in a season where you could argue he's back to his like peak career form. Lockie Ash getting limited looks inside the midfield, only managed 3 clearances as well. Unreal. Kieran Briggs as a ruckman only had 1, and I think I don't know whether they had, no, they didn't have Nick Madden in there for secondary, so they had Kieran Briggs running as that number 1 ruck, and he only managed 1 clearance for the game. And he's one of those bigger bodied, kind of ruckman that can get down and dirty and get that clearance work. It was very clinical, Hawthorn here. They just go about it their own way. They just know how their systems operate and how they're going to go into games and how they can mitigate certain damage. Sam Mitchell, I feel, is one of the smartest coaches in the competition, and some people might think that's ridiculous, but I mean, Sam Mitchell was a very clever footballer, and he's able to transition that into his own coaching game. I think it's incredible. The one big thing to come out of this particular week, however, is the talk around town that potentially Sam Mitchell, and I don't want to buy into rumor all too much, but Sam Mitchell is apparently gettable as a coach, or he's open to discussions. Absolutely wild. As a Richmond man, if Sam Mitchell's available, I wouldn't mind picking up the phone and seeing whether he wants to come down to Punt Road and have a bit of a crack, because as much as I've been getting behind Adamuze, I'm starting to see some cracks, and I'm starting to see where people are coming from, but alas, we'll get to that game momentarily. For this game, it was hard to look past Clayton Oliver for a 1 vote, even though he only had those 3 clearances. I think the other numbers around the ground really spoke to the form that he's starting to run into this season. He had 34 disposals, 12 of which were contested, 3 marks, 9 tackles, 3 clearances, 405 metres gained, 1 goal, 1 goal assist, and 9 score involvements. The 2 vote went to Cam McKenzie. Absolutely incredible game, and in a season where some injuries have been hitting Hawthorn and opportunity has come knocking, it's good to see players like Cam McKenzie just grabbing those reins and really taking control. 27 disposals, 8 were contested, 3 marks, 7 tackles, 7 clearances, 334 metres gained, 1 goal, 2 goal assists, and 11 score involvements, which was the most score involvements on the night. And Jai Newcomb gets the 3 vote for me here. As I said, Brownlow Smokey, because going off of my own voting, he's been picking up 3 votes over the last couple of weeks. And if Hawthorn are winning games, Jai Newcomb is almost around the contest, single-handedly at least keeping them in it, if not winning it for them. 31 disposals, 21 of those were contested, 3 marks, 4 tackles, 15 clearances, 226 metres gained, 9 score involvements. Now, GWS is a team that I floated as a potential wild card this year, because on paper they've got one of the best teams. But I think it's time to really look at the reality and the stark realisation that I think GWS aren't going to play finals this year. And I think it's the first time under Adam Kingsley that they're not going to, which, in isolation comes as a shock. They've been hit from pillar to post. I mean, they're a different team if they've got Hogan, if they've got Green, if they've got Kelly. If they're fit and firing, they don't have to move pieces around. They can keep Lockie Ash purely in defence. They can keep Whitfield purely in defence. They don't have to move magnets. It's a different team. But we can only use that excuse for so long. GWS is still putting a killer team out there each and every week, just not managing to get the job done in a game where, statistically speaking, in certain aspects, should have gotten on top of the Hawthorn team here, but Hawthorn just rose to the occasion. And Hawthorn right now, primed to at least guarantee to finish in this top 6, but a top 4 finish is not out of the realm of possibility. When it comes to putting videos like this together, I try to find ways to drag out talking about each game, not just because I love talking about football, but obviously I don't want to discredit teams, especially when, people can see that as kind of me taking slant or shot at other opposition when Richmond have been doing incredibly poorly, and as a Richmond supporter, kind of looks like, I'm taking some jabs, and I don't want it to come across that way. But unfortunately, sometimes we are going to get matchups that are so one-sided, statistically on the scoreboard, whatever the case may be, that when it comes to doing breakdown videos like this, those matches can get glanced over really quickly. There's not really much to hang your hat on to talk about both teams. We can just run through statistics, have a little bit of a chat, do my votes, and then that's it, we move on. And unfortunately, for all the West Coast supporters out there, the next game definitely falls into that category. At Marvel Stadium, Saturday afternoon, Carlton hosted West Coast. It was a game where I feel everybody expected Carlton to win, given how Carlton have been performing recently, especially under Josh Fraser. But West Coast have been showing some effort, and I actually did credit them coming into this game, saying I thought they had the tools necessary to give Carlton, you know, a little bit of an upset here and to kind of kick them off. I don't want to say high horse, but kind of kick them off of their streak that they're kind of running on. But it was just, apart from winning the hitouts, Carlton dominated every single stat in this game. So much so, there were 3 stats that were season high differentials in those stat lines. We'll talk about the match timeline breakdown just to show Carlton's dominance here, and then we'll quickly talk about the team statistics, and we'll talk about the players. And unfortunately, that's where this falls into this category. We'll talk about it. We'll move on. Carlton at quarter time led 6-5-41 to 2-2-14. Halftime, 10-6-66, led 5-4-34. Three-quarter time, 12-11-83, led 7-5-47. And full-time score, 17-15, 117, defeated 9-10-64. Now, there was a bit of an arm wrestle early in the first quarter. Momentum never shifted from Carlton, and it was just a game where you felt with every goal that was kicked, Carlton were just going to keep going and going and going, and it was just going to be a matter of how much a margin it was going to be in the end. In the end, it was 53 points, with the inaccuracy that Carlton showed. Could have been and should have been a lot bigger, but you can argue the fact that West Coast's inaccuracy could have stemmed the flow as well. But let me tell you here some of the statistics that set Carlton apart in this game. 20-6 marks inside 50, which is their best differential this season in regards to that. They scored 6 goals, 8 from those marks. Only 3 points were scored by West Coast for their 6 marks inside 50. So just putting the gap there, they took 20 marks and they scored, 14 times from those 20 marks inside 50? Huge return. As for the other differentials, they recorded 144 more disposals in total than West Coast, 59 more uncontested marks than West Coast, and 116 more uncontested possessions, which I said are all season high differentials, not just for Carlton, but over the entire competition. This was a game where if Carlton needed any more confidence or momentum, defeating West Coast the way they did here goes a long way to doing that. And for a team that for the first 9 rounds had only beaten Richmond and had lost every other game after that fact, pretty much, they have now put themselves in a position where they are only 1 win out of wildcard contention. And they play Richmond this coming weekend, which, as a Richmond man, we saw Richmond take it to Carlton in round 1. And I know momentum's a big thing. Carlton are probably going to be running red hot into this game more so than that round 1 hit out. I would love Richmond to be the team to knock Carlton off their perch. I just don't see it happening. And Carlton have other matchups coming into this late run in the year where they can really set themselves up for wildcard, which is insane to think that they've turned that around, especially under an interim coach. Josh Fraser has been the man to turn it around, but it still seems he doesn't want to be the man to do the main job. Wild to me. Statistics, let's quickly talk about it. Disposals, 445 by Carlton, leading 301 for West Coast. 251 kicks to 174, 194 handballs to 127, 61 inside 50s to 49. They lost the hitouts, 22 to 40, but that's it. Clearance, 48 to 34, the way of Carlton. Contested possessions, 142 to 114. Uncontested, 296 to 180. Marks around the ground, 133 to 66. Contested marks, 13 to 5. Inside 50, 20 to 4. Tackles, 61 to 48. The only other stat that West Coast have won is they had 8 more bounces and 2 more 1% pressure acts. But when you don't have the ball in hand, you would expect the team to lead those pressure acts, right? I mean, you have a look at the performances here, and I'm being serious here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. 4 of the top 20 rated players on the field were from West Coast, and all of the top 10 were from Carlton. And it wasn't just players you would expect. Like, you expect Cripps, Walsh, Hewitt, Newman, but Cherra's starting to find some form. Taylor Byrne was up there. Lockie Cowan, Billy Wilson, Ben Ainsworth was the highest rated player on the day. Harry Dean up there as well. Yaga Smith, Francis Evans. Comprehensive beatdown. And as you would expect when it came to the votes, it was votes to 3 Carlton players. Now, I tossed and turned about configuration and certain players coming in and out here. These are the 3 I landed on. There were others that could have gotten votes. I feel I've been stiff to not give a vote to Sam Walsh. He had a very good outing. Nick Newman, Billy Wilson, Cherra. Taylor Byrne kicks 3 goals as well. But I gave 1 vote to Patrick Cripps. Now, Patrick Cripps at the start of the year had started going on a run where a lot of people were questioning the integrity of backing up Brownlow medal wins because he was a shadow of his former self at the start of the year. Josh Fraser takes over, and this bastard starts playing back into Brownlow contending form. I don't understand it, but he had 31 disposals, 16 were contested, 4 marks, 6 tackles, 1 hit out, 9 clearances, 331 metres gained, 1 goal and 9 score involvements. I gave the 2 vote to George Hewitt. Now, how this guy was not getting a game under Michael Voss is fucking beyond me. Michael Voss came out in a press conference and said George Hewitt not being selected was for the better of the team. And yet, George Hewitt comes back in under Josh Fraser and has been consistently among Carlton's best performers. Go figure. But he had 26 disposals, 6 were contested, 4 marks, 1 tackle, 4 clearances, 201 metres gained, 2 goals, and 10 score involvements. And best on for me was Ben Ainsworth. It's easily the best game he's played under Carlton, and one of the best games I think I've ever seen him turn around and play. 28 disposals, 7 contested, 9 marks, 2 tackles, 5 clearances, 420 metres gained, 1 goal, 3 goal assists, 11 score involvements. Not much to really take out of this for West Coast fans. Unfortunately, this was an absolute beatdown that they would rather forget. But for Carlton, they've been undefeated under Josh Fraser. They have all the answers. They're playing themselves into form. Could we see a team that everybody was writing off at the start of the year, including myself, as a potential bottom 4, bottom 5 finish, play finals this year and win a wildcard round? Remains to be seen, but they're in red hot form and I don't see anybody stopping them. It unfortunately didn't get any better in the next game, with Collingwood hosting Richmond at the MCG. Now, this was a game going into it that I know Collingwood were going to beat us, and beat us quite convincingly. I was just hoping to see some signs of hope, some shining light, and in the first quarter I got that, but after that it played out the exact same way that Carlton did against Richmond. The only difference in this game, at least, is Richmond were able to stem the flow by winning some key aspects around the ground, which I at least think, as a Richmond supporter, you can hang your hat on. But I mean, we're still getting dragged by the AFL media, and supporter base is starting to get very angry. So it's a very tumultuous time to be a Richmond supporter, unfortunately. But Collingwood, by the way, of 34 points, I think was flattering in the end, because there were some misses that they had on goal that should have definitely gone through. At quarter time, it was 2-3 apiece, 15 points. At halftime, Collingwood led 8-6, 54 to 3-3, 21. At three-quarter time, they led 11-10, 76 to 7-6, 48. And the final scoreline saw Collingwood 15-16, 106, defeat Richmond 11-6, 72. Now, okay, Richmond managed to kick 11 goals in a game of football. Absolutely fantastic. The stoppage game, you'll see we won. We won the hitouts as well. But Collingwood were just convincingly better all around the ground. And it was just turnover city for Richmond, just lack of basic skill. We don't have, a cohesive forward 50, so we're bombing the ball long and it's getting turned over so easily. It's very disheartening to see all of these young kids digging deep for little return. And that's what crushes me the most. I know we've got a list that can take us forward, and moving some pieces during the off-season through trade and through drafting can bolster that. But man, just going through the injury crisis we have had this year has just put us on the back foot. And you can argue that even though we've got players coming back from injury now, there's no cohesiveness, no continuity in their game, no synergy with players on the field. So there's a lot of things to look at in isolation. But outside of this season, and I said it last week in my round recap, we're does the improvement come from, and where do the excuses end, and where does the accountability come in? Because Uze takes over his first year. Okay, it's his first year. List has bottomed out. They've traded players out. We've lost players through retirement. You could expect that to be, an off year. Second year at the helm, we win 5 games. We over exceed our expectations, and people are saying, hey, there's something about this Richmond team that looks good. And then this year we've been slapped pillar to post with injury. What about next year? In isolation, we've won 9 games out of 60 odd. And while, Damien Barrett and these other media experts keep talking about, oh, we don't want to see Uze sacked, but I mean, he's only won 9 out of 61. The point is being pushed. People want to see Uze gone. And unfortunately, that is a stark reality. People need to really start thinking about. I mean, Richmond are backing him, but how far can you go? I mean, there's some superior coaching talent out there available right now. Ken Hinkley, John Longmire. You've got Buckley kind of in isolation. You've got Sam Mitchell apparently gettable. It's outrageous to think that you've got all this talent. Adam Simpson, even all this talent available. Might be time to start looking outward and trying to find something else. I'm not too sure. The only other highlight for me for Richmond is Sam Cumming over the last couple of weeks has been fantastic. In this game alone, game high 12 contested possessions, 27 disposals, 4 clearances, and Tim Taranto scored a career high 4 goals playing out of the forward half from 26 disposals. But apart from that, nothing much else really. Collingwood had 7 more disposals, so I suppose Richmond stemmed the flow there. The kicking game was where they put on a big gap. Richmond did try a handballing game here, but the turnovers just killed us. 56 to 51 inside 50s. They only had 5 more inside 50s than we did, and they beat us by 34 points. We ran at 35% inside of 50, which was absolutely woeful. We did win the hitouts 33 to 25. We won the clearance game by 1. But after that, I mean, contested possession we won as well, which is wild. But I mean, 122 marks to 24. We took 13 inside 50 marks, but couldn't capitalise. We only laid 37 tackles for the game. They laid 61. Our pressure rating has not been good. There's been isolated moments in games where our pressure rating has been through the roof in a quarter, but it just drops off so quickly. It sucks, and it's an unfortunate reality, but we live to fight another day, I suppose. We had, I think in the VFL, 11 AFL listed players play this past weekend, so at least we're now starting to get troops back. And with some players underperforming at the level, it'll be interesting to see what Uze does, especially with this whole, there's a push for spots in this team. You got to earn your spot. So let's see how much he truly holds on to that aspect. For the votes, I gave 1 vote to Jordan De Goey, 27 disposals, 5 were contested, 7 marks, 2 tackles, 3 clearances, 456 metres gained, 1 goal, 4 goal assists, 13 score involvements. I did give the 2 vote to Tim Taranto. I thought on the day he was one of the better performers. 26 disposals, 11 were contested, 3 marks, 2 tackles, 3 clearances, 349 metres gained, 4 goals, 1 goal assist, 7 score involvements, and best on was Nick Dacos. And to be completely honest, probably should be front running the Brownlow at this point in the season, and if he's not, there's something wrong. 37 disposals, 11 were contested, 6 marks, 3 tackles, 7 clearances, 512 metres gained, 3 goals, 1 goal assist, 14 score involvements. Collingwood are one of those teams that are wild card rounding this year, and I think they still definitely have it in them to make that spot. There are some teams fighting for those roles though, so it'll be very interesting to see how that plays out. But we could see potentially round 1 of the finals, that wild card round where the 2 winners advance on to take on players and teams within that top 6. Collingwood versus Carlton could potentially be a wild card game, and what a grudge match that would be. Holy shit. As for Richmond, let's just hang tough. I'm not calling it quits. I never back away from my boys. It's been a rough year. I'd rather put a line through it and just forget it. There has been some highlights. Statistically, we were good in this game in certain aspects. It's just failing to do simple things just undoes a club so incredibly well, and that's exactly where Richmond fell into the category this week, unfortunately. So, fuck. We move on. The final game on Saturday night saw the Adelaide show... Ooh, I just farted and that stink. Oh, shit. The final game on Saturday night saw the Adelaide Showdown rematch. Earlier this year, we saw that game teeter on the way of two potential outcomes. Joe Berry kicks a goal for Port Adelaide to put them up by 5 points. Braden Cook says, hold my beer, kicks a goal. Adelaide win by a singular point. One of the biggest and best finishes to a showdown that we have seen in recent years. This was set up with all that hype. Adelaide, with all of this momentum, looking at potentially going for a top 4 finish, a top 6 finish. Port Adelaide down the bottom of the ladder, kind of not where they expected to be. Everybody expected, with the turnaround that we have seen Adelaide undergo since that first showdown earlier this year, that they would fall into the pocket of an absolute smacking here. They fell into the pocket of a smacking. In the end, actually, 26 points isn't a smacking, but all the dominance, all the momentum was all the way of Port Adelaide, walking away with 26 points, the win. I was so impressed. This was a game where Adelaide, I thought, for at least a quarter and a half, had this game under wraps. And even though it was tight at quarter time, and that kind of stemmed and flowed into the second term, Port Adelaide putting the foot down late in that second half and then just running away with it in the third quarter, I was blown away. And then you start to question where that effort has been in certain games this year, because if that effort had been seen in other games, outcomes I feel would have fallen a different way, and we'd be talking about Port Adelaide in a different light. At quarter time, Adelaide led 4-2-26 to 3-4-22. At half time, Port Adelaide led 8-6-54 to 6-2-38. At 3-quarter time, Port Adelaide led 12-13-85 to 8-4-52. Where Port Adelaide fell a little bit short was leaving the door open, but alas, that gap at the 3-quarter time was too big, because even though they only managed to kick 1 goal 6 for the final term, they did still win 13-19, 97 to 11-5, 71. 19 behinds. This could have and should have been an absolute belting, and we'll talk about the offenders later on. But this was I was just watching this game just in shock, in awe. I was just blown away. And statistically, some of the outcomes in this game, you could argue that Adelaide should have had the jump on them. I mean, they had 30 odd more disposals than Port Adelaide. Port Adelaide had 52 inside 50s to 45, so only had 7 more inside 50s, but they were just way more efficient with it. Adelaide only ran at 42% inside 50. Port Adelaide ran at 67%. Port Adelaide dominated the hitouts, 47 to 31. They dominated the clearance, 42 to 22. They won both centre clearance and stoppage clearance by 10 apiece. Uncontested possessions they lost, but they won the contested possession. They had 100 marks to 79, which 79 is almost 20 under Adelaide's seasonal average. Defensively, they laid 63 tackles apiece, so the pressure around the ground was up. Adelaide dominated the 1% pressure acts, 41 to 27. So around the contest, Adelaide's pressure was up and was about, but Port Adelaide just found a way to get the ball forward and continue just putting on goal after goal after goal. Don't get me wrong, Adelaide suffered an injury. I think at one point, Isaac Rankin got taken off the field, and that's when a bit of a gap kind of opened up a little bit, but there's no excusing it. Port Adelaide just had answers. And every time that ball moved forward, and I mean, there was instances where Adelaide would kick a goal and get up and about, and then Port Adelaide within 30 seconds, bang, another goal's kicked. I was just mind blown. In isolation, looking at how big of a win this could have been, Mitch Georgiades kicks 3 goals 4. Jason Horne-Francis kicks 1 goal 3. Whitlock kicks 2 behinds. Durden kicks 2 behinds. A behind for Zadao, Richards, Mead. Butters only kicks a behind. Bamert only kicks a behind. What this could have been. Holy shit. This could have been opened up in a big way. And outside of the usual suspects in Dawson, Worrell, McAndrew, even though he was beaten convincingly in the ruck, he was actually the higher rated ruck, which I find very interesting. And Sam Berry digging deep. Rory Laird dug deep. Darcy Fogarty had a good game. Darcy Fogarty's probably stiff to not get a vote despite kicking 5 goals. This was just Port Adelaide absolutely all the way through. I mean, Josh Lai has his best game for Port. Burgoyne, Berry, Georgiades, Richards, Wines. It was a game they didn't even really need Aliir to stand up and get too many intercept marks, which is absolutely wild. These are the votes I landed on for the game. I gave the 1 vote to Mitch Georgiades. He had 16 disposals, 4 of which were contested, 11 marks, 1 tackle, 313 metres gained, 3 goals and 10 score involvements. Gave the 2 vote to Jason Horne-Francis. He's in some kind of form. 29 disposals, 12 were contested, 5 marks, 2 tackles, 10 clearances, 494 metres gained, 1 goal and 9 score involvements. And best on ground was the man who won the best on ground honours for the game itself, and that was Zach Butters. 37 disposals, 23 contested, 4 marks, 7 tackles, 13 clearances, 704 metres gained, 9 score involvements. I leave you with this. Port Adelaide, obviously Zach Butters touted to leave. I've been hearing rumours that Mitch Georgiades might be on the way out as well. Do Port Adelaide keep Zach Butters or does he leave? And if he does leave, where do you think he lands? Let's talk about it in the comments down below. I, as a Richmond man, would love to see us get him. I'm just a little bit skewed by the amount of money we're potentially offering here when we've got young kids that we should be securing futures of. And I don't like the idea of maybe floating captaincy straight away when there are players at our club that I would be giving that honour to ahead of bringing someone in and just giving him captaincy. I think he changes the dynamic of any club he plays for, and I'm all in for him in certain retrospects. I want him at Tigerland, and I'm going to follow his movements very closely this off-season. But man, what a player. Just goes to another gear when you need him to get there. And Port Adelaide, in a performance that nobody expected them to really turn up, they turned up, and fuck, they did it well. And Adelaide fumbling this particular game, this could be a loss that sees them miss that top 4. They still, I think, will finish top 6. Adelaide's run home is too good to look past. But man, what could have been if they didn't fumble some of these games this year? For both sides. The first on Sunday sees North Melbourne take on Essendon at Marvel Stadium in a game that statistically is so fucking confusing and wild that I'm still sitting here trying to get my head around what went down. Because it was North Melbourne by the way of 14 points in a game where 19 behinds really flatters Essendon given the scope of some of the statistics I'm about to break down for you. The match timeline itself, at quarter time, North Melbourne led 2-6-18 to 2-2-14. At halftime, they led 5-9-39 to 4-6-30. And then in the second half, they decided it was time to put the foot down. 8-15-63, led 5-8-38, and then the final score, 10-19-79, defeated 9-11-65. They kicked 5 goals 10 in the second half, North Melbourne. Just you wait to hear this right now. This was the most uncontested game of the season, statistically. Essendon had 94 contested possessions for the game, which is the third lowest tally, not just for them, but for the season collectively. The Kangaroos had 97, which is the 5th lowest count of the year. Yet, North Melbourne had 321 uncontested possessions, which was the most recorded by any team this year. This game, I'm telling you right now, I broke down the statistics of this and can't get my head around it. North Melbourne led 435 disposals to 360. 233 kicks against 217, 202 handballs against 143. Inside 50s, they had 11 more, 51 to 40 for the game, at a strike rate of 56% inside 50. Stoppages. Essendon dominated the hitouts. Obviously, no Tristan Cherry. They were going to struggle a little bit. 37 to 22. North, however, won the clearance game by 3, 28 to 25. But then the contested and uncontested breakdown. Essendon had 253 uncontested. North Melbourne had 321, which is over 80 disposals more than their seasonal average. It's wild to think that this game had fuck all contested possessions, but uncontested was through the roof. There was just loose players everywhere. Handball game, kicking game, whatever you want. That is how this game went down. I'm still trying to process it. 124 marks to 129, both exceeding their seasonal averages. Essendon by 30, North Melbourne by 20. Tackles, North Melbourne had more of the ball, but still laid almost 20 more tackles for the game, which is absolutely insane. This game was so... I couldn't get my head around it. Could not get my head around it. There was marks taken left, right, and centre. I mean, the 4 top mark getters for the game, 12, 12, 12, and 10. The tackle game, there was huge numbers for tackles. There was big numbers for clearances, but the uncontested game, again, holy shit. I just can't... I was just watching the game, and I was expecting maybe with no Tristan Cherry, the contested game would be a little bit more built up. Zach Merritt plays predominantly from what looked like a half-back kind of role out of defence. I don't know whether that's the move for him, but hey, at the end of the year, I think he's gone to Hawthorn anyway. It was just a very interesting game of football. It was one I did not expect, and I think all that uncontested work and obviously the inaccuracy of North Melbourne creeping in allowed Essendon to get as close as they did. When you have a look at the behinds, I mean, Nick Larkey kicks 1 goal 5. Trembath kicks 2 behinds. Dylan Stevens kicks 2 behinds. But then again, Archie Perkins has 4 shots on goal and kicks 4 behinds as well. The biggest talking point out of this game, I suppose, was the controversial arc decision. The ball looked like it had gone over the goal line. Nate Caddy gets a boot onto it, and they say there was inconclusive evidence to determine whether it was over the line or not. I think it was conclusive. I thought it went over the line and then came back into play, and then he's kicked it, but... man, I just can't get my head around these statistics. It blows my mind. As for the 3-2-1 here, I have fallen the way of 3 Kangaroos. We have gone with Caleb Daniel for the 1 vote. He had 40 disposals, 5 of which were contested, 9 marks, 2 tackles, 1 clearance, 586 metres gained, and 12 score involvements. The 2 vote I gave to Luke Davies-Uniacke. He seemed a little bit disinterested over the last few weeks and only played at 77% game time last week, or the week prior, sorry, but this last week gone was pivotal in the stoppage. 25 disposals, 11 contested, 3 marks, 11 tackles, 10 clearances, 353 metres gained, 1 goal, and 9 score involvements. And best on ground for me, and should poll really well Brownlow-wise, I feel, is Harry Sheasel. Again, another best on ground performance, and he's having a stellar year, at least in my opinion. 43 disposals, 13 were contested, 12 marks, 8 tackles, 4 clearances, 335 metres gained, 1 goal assist, 15 score involvements. Now, North Melbourne, I think when we look at the ladder, I could be mistaken, are only a win out of the top 4, which is absolutely wild, especially when you have a look at the fact of who they have played up until this point in time, who they've struggled against. Essendon, on the other hand, I feel this was probably their last winnable game for the season without looking at their run home. They could finish on the bottom of the ladder. Number 1 pick overall in the draft. Probably not a bad thing for them given the year they've had. But man, I just... fucking almost 400 uncontested fucking possessions for a game. That's wild. And the wildness over this round continues with Fremantle hosting the Gold Coast at Optus Stadium to round out the round. And earlier this year, Gold Coast started on their hot streak, undefeated, looking absolutely fantastic, and they have dropped off severely. And I have said over the last few weeks, maybe they've been found out. Maybe they're not the contenders we thought they were. Maybe all this hyperbole around bringing these players in and being a very good team and having all these star players running around is something that we're maybe overglazing just a little bit. Because again, on paper, their midfield quartet is the best in the competition if you ask me. Rowell, Anderson, Miller, Petrarca, huge. But again, highlighted many times by myself before, and I'm doing it again this week. 1 or 2 of them might pop off in a game, but the other 2 struggle. And we're yet to see a game where all 4 collectively fire. And this was a game where Tuke Miller didn't really rise to the occasion, and Petrarca was well underdone. This was a game that saw Gold Coast only score 1 goal in the first half, and then only 2 goals to follow that. 3 goals in a full game of football. Man, There's only one image that sums up this game, and it's this one right now. Yeah, eat shit, Dimmer. Go and get fucked. All right. Looking at the match timeline, at quarter time, Fremantle led 4-4-28 to 2 behinds. 4-7-31 led 1 goal 5-11 at halftime. 8-12-60 led 2-8-20 at 3-quarter time. And 11-14-80 defeated 3-11-29. This was, as comprehensive a beatdown as you will see, but on the scoreboard it looked that way. Some of the stats are kind of indicative of the fact that Gold Coast should have been more competitive, especially in the stoppage and clearance. Dockers had 60 more disposals, essentially 393 to 329. Obviously the handball game is where they get their ball up and running. They had 54 more handballs, 54 inside 50s to 40, only running at 53% inside 50. Gold Coast running at only 37% inside 50. Gold Coast actually won the hit-out game. Ned Moyle getting the better of Luke Jackson in the hit-outs, but this is where I digress, and I said it on social media, and I'm going to say it here. The decision to drop Mason Cox and bring in Sean Darcy was a terrible call. I'll break down Sean Darcy's stats momentarily, but Luke Jackson, solo ruck, Mason Cox, primary forward, goes into the ruck to chop out. Sean Darcy's time at Fremantle's done. I think Luke Jackson surpassed him, and I think Mason Cox is more utilisable on field than what Sean Darcy is. Just my opinion. 36 hit-outs to 42 the way of the Gold Coast, and they won the clearance 36 to 24. So they had 12 more clearances. At stoppage, they had 11 more. Wild. Uncontested possessions. Almost 100 more, well, at least 80 more the way of Fremantle. Marks around the ground, 91 to 75. Gold Coast well down on their output that they usually do. 67 tackles to 45 the way of Fremantle, when Fremantle had 60 more disposals. Imagine having 60 more disposals and leading the tackle count by 22. Absolutely wild, and that just shows that Gold Coast can get all the stoppage clearance they want. Fremantle's pressure around the contest and their run and carry really opened the Gold Coast up throughout this game. Now, speaking of Sean Darcy, let me run you through his output here. He had 6 disposals for the game. 20 hit-outs, but only 6 disposals. Didn't take a mark. 2 clearances and kicked a goal. And he actually ran at a negative 12 metres gained. Wild. Absolutely wild, especially when you think of the fact that Luke Jackson was one of the better performers on the day, and he had 15 disposals, 5 marks, 3 tackles, 16 hit-outs, 4 clearances, 2 goals, handful of score involvements. I don't even know whether outside of the 1 goal Sean Darcy kicked, did he have any score involvements? Let me have a look here. He had 3, so apart from his goal, he got involved in 2 more, but Luke Jackson has 7. Like, he's just the more superior being. If they're going to go a ruck attack, I think it's Cox and I think it's Jackson. Don't touch something that isn't broken. Just my personal opinion. Obviously, the run and carry game too hard for Gold Coast to get on top of. Their pressure around the contest forced some errors that Fremantle were able to capitalise on. And when you force those fumbles and you've got a clean, cohesive handball game that you're basing your strategies and you're implementing, those strategies upon, you're going to get absolutely destroyed, and no, there's no surprise why Fremantle's running as hot as they are this year. For the 3-2-1, I landed on Shea Bolton for 1 vote, 26 disposals, 7 contested, 6 marks, 4 tackles, 2 clearances, 417 metres gained, 1 goal assist, 8 score involvements. I threw the 2 vote at Luke Jackson. I thought, just given the fact that Darcy was brought in, that he was kind of secondary to the fact, I thought just for the input he had and the amount of ball he had, 15 disposals and 7 score involvements at 50%, almost every second possession he had, he was adding to the score, which I think is insane. 15 disposals, 6 are contested, 5 marks, 3 tackles, 17 hit-outs, 4 clearances, 244 metres gained, 2 goals, 3 goal assists, and 7 score involvements. And the 3 vote over the last month has really reclaimed form that he was missing early this year. Andrew Brayshaw, 29 disposals, 4 of which were contested, 9 marks, 6 tackles, 1 clearance, 657 metres gained, 1 goal assist, 10 score involvements. Do the Gold Coast make top 6 now? Do they finish wildcard? Do they miss completely? Unknown commodities, but with the football they've been playing recently, I feel like we can almost put a line through them. And if they fall from grace as hard as they're about to, boy, oh boy, are the fans going to be in absolute raptures in a negative way. For Fremantle, 14 in a row. I think they need to lose a game or two before finals, before they get a full steam ahead of themselves. But they're playing the best brand of football right now. They're clearly 2 games now clear on top of the ladder and the best team in the comp. The Purple Haze is running strong in 2026. Can they claim their first club premiership? Remains to be seen. After 16 rounds of football, this is how the ladder looks and where your teams are situated. As I said, sitting 2 games clear on top of the ladder, we have Fremantle on 56 points. Trailing them on 48 points is Sydney in second place. Hawthorn are in third place on 42, a game and a half ahead of the next best, which sees Geelong in 4th, Brisbane in 5th, Adelaide in 6th, and Melbourne in 7th, and the Bulldogs in 8th. All on 36 points. This is where I'm saying percentage is going to be a big thing, because right now 6% is stopping Melbourne from getting a guaranteed finals chance to having to fight for it, and the Bulldogs are further back from that as well. So these teams, I'm telling you, they need to start taking opportunity when it comes knocking. To round out the wild card, we have North Melbourne in 9th place on 32 points and Collingwood in 10th place on 30 points. Trailing them, the Gold Coast has dropped out of the wildcard round, sitting in 11th place, and Carlton have moved up to 12th place, both on 28 points. Again, Carlton, if they can win this coming weekend, could potentially finish the round in wildcard contention. That is absolutely insane. Sitting in 13th is St Kilda and GWS in 14th with 24 points apiece. Port Adelaide, despite the win against Adelaide, still sitting in 15th place on 20 points. West Coast Eagles are in 16th on 16 points. Richmond are in 17th on 8 points. And Essendon are in last place with 4 points. With all the important stuff out of the way, we can now turn attention to the fun parts. The parts where my own decision-making plays factor. First, we have a look at the leaderboard for the 2026 Hip and Shoulder MVP Award after 16 rounds, and this is how my top 10 is currently situated. In 10th place on 12 votes, I have Shea Bolton and Brodie Grundy. In 9th place on 13 votes, I have Keziah Pickett, Tristan Cherry, Nasiah Wanganeen-Malira, and Patrick Cripps. In 8th place on 14 votes, I have Max Gawn, Will Ashcroft, and Jason Horne-Francis. In 7th place on 15 votes, I have Max Holmes. In 6th place on 16 votes, I have Jordan Dawson and Jai Newcomb. In 5th place on 19 votes, I have Marcus Bontempelli. In 4th place on 20 votes, I have Luke Jackson. In 3rd place on 21 votes, I have Zach Butters. In 2nd place on 22 votes, I have Bailey Smith and Isaac Heaney. And in 1st place, tied on 25 votes, I have Nick Dacos and Harry Sheasel. There is only one more thing to do to officially recap this round of football, and that is to announce my team of the week for round 16, and this is where I landed with my selections. In defence, I have Mason Redman and Jordan Clark in the back pockets and James Sicily at full back, with Josh Dacos and Caleb Daniel on the half-back flanks and Dan Houston at centre half-back. In the midfield, I have Andrew Brayshaw and Harry Sheasel on the wings, with Jai Newcomb in the centre, with Jordan Sweet in the ruck, Nick Dacos as this week's vice-captain in Ruck Rover, and Zach Butters as this week's captain in Rover. Up forward, I have Chad Warner and Jason Horne-Francis on the half-forward flanks, and Darcy Fogarty at centre-half-forward, with Ben Ainsworth and Tim Taranto in the forward pockets, and Mitch Georgiades at full forward. On the interchange, I have Will Ashcroft, Luke Davies-Uniacke, George Hewitt, Cam McKenzie, and Luke Jackson. This week's coach of the round is Chris Fagan, and this week's assistant coach of the round is Josh Carr. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, the round is officially recapped. Do thank you for joining me as always. keep your eyes peeled. This coming weekend, I've got some different types of content dropping, and I'm very keen to see how you guys take that on board. Do leave a like on the video if you enjoyed. Do hit that subscribe button if you want to get on board the community we are building together here. Let me know how you're feeling about your team currently and the state of the game in the comment section down below. But that's it from me, guys. I'm out of here, and as always, I will catch you guys next time.